Good day, everyone. You must have seen experiences where you see various fireworks happening or raindrops falling. How are these experiences created? To simulate these experiences, you use the tool called as particle system in Unity. Particle systems control a number of small particles which overall create an effect such as smoke, fire, fog, and so on. Particle systems are very useful as they let you control a high amount of detail using the particles. We can change the velocity, the size of the particles. We can do a lot of it with the particles. So if you want to develop fireworks, if you want your fireworks to happen in your experience background, you can do it using the particle system. So now let's actually create a particle system and understand how it actually works. For creating the particle system, what I have done is I have created a new project called as particle system, and I've created a new scene called as particle. Now, to add a particle system to my current scene, what I will do is I'll go to the hierarchy menu and click on plus and then downward. In the effects section, you'll see particle system. Now, if you can see on my screen, these are the particles that are being generated from a point source. So basically, what is happening is, think about a small particle that are being generated and going in space. So that is what is happening. On the lower right hand side corner, you see the particle effect where you can pause particles, you can restart the particles, or you can stop the particles. You can also control the playback speed of these particles. For example, now if I want the particles to move faster, I'll just click on, you can see the particles going faster and faster, and you make them very slow also. So depending on how you want the particle to go actually act, you can change the speed of those particles also. So now we'll look at the various inspector options that you can see over here on the right hand side. So let's look at that inspector options. First is the duration. So let me see whether I can increase. So first is the duration. So duration shows the duration where the particles are emitted. So if the emission of the particles happens only for 5 seconds, it will emit only for 5 seconds and then stop unless and until the looping is on. What happens is in looping is that suppose you have a movie running in a loop, so it will run again and again and again. So that's what looping does. So if your particle system is run for 5 minutes, it will stop after 5 minutes, as you can see over here. But if you are on the looping and say play, it will keep on looping and playing those particles again and again and again. Pre-warm is basically what happens is, think about a scene where the smoke is already present. So as soon as you start the game, the smoke is present. You're not waiting for it to develop. You're not waiting for the particles to develop that smoke. So in that situation, you use something called as a pre-warm. Whereas if you want, as soon as the scene is started to actually for the smoke to develop, you use you unselect the pre-warm. Okay. Over here, you can see the various options such as delay, how delayed you want the particles to start, the lifetime of the particles. So every particle has a lifetime. So each particle will start with a lifetime, a speed. So I can increase the speed of the particles also. I can do rotation, I can flip rotation, I can change the color over here. For example, if I change the color, I can change the color. So depending on how I want the color, this is very useful if you have to simulate raindrops. You can actually simulate raindrops over here. One of the good things that I found out is, what if your particles are affected by gravity? There is an option called as gravity modifier. You can see over here that you can have the particles actually act in terms of gravity. So as I increase this value, you can see that the particles are being affected by the gravity. So this is very useful when you're creating fountains. So think about you're creating fountains and you're using this gravity modifier option to actually have the particles go rise up, water particles go rise up and come down. So it's similar to that. Next, you have the simulation speed, play on awake. So basically, when the simulation starts, immediately plays the emitter velocity, and so on. So you can see and a lot of options. So that's the beauty about particle system. It gives you a lot of control over what you're doing. So let's look at the emission. it says the emission, it's basically like, it's like the emission material property. It emits over time. That's what emission does, the shape. Now here you can have the shape over here. So you can have, as you can see over here, the particles are coming out through a cone. Now if I change the shape to a sphere, it will be spherical. So the particle, this is how the particles are spreading around. So spheres and hemisphere. So depending on how the shape of the emitter is there. A donut, you want the particles to come out outside a donut, also a box. So you can control the kind of way you want the particles to come out. You can create, reduce or increase the size of this cone or the size of the box. You can increase the thickness of the box. You can increase the mode, the speed of. So you can play around with these various options over here. Now, next option that you see is velocity over lifetime. So every particle has a lifetime, and you can basically change its overall velocity as it progresses. So this option is basically used to control the velocity of the particle over lifetime. And one of the important things to keep is right below it, there is an option called as limit velocity over lifetime. Think about if you're increasing the particle, which is going increasing its velocity higher, going higher and higher and higher. Now, what you want to do is it should reach a particular velocity and stay in that velocity. So, limit velocity over lifetime basically limits the velocity of the particle. This is very useful so that your particle does not increase exponentially the speed. So that's where you kind of limit it and say, okay, this is where the limit is. So, and you have much more over options over here. You see color over lifetime. What is the color of the particle over lifetime? You can see over here. I can change the color to red. So various particles. So again, all these options can be set. You want the color to change as per speed. You want the size of the particles to change as per speed and lifetime. The rotation of the particles, the collision of the particles. So this is one of the interesting options that I found out. Think about a plane right in front of this particle system. So these particles are colliding on this plane and dispersing. So you use basically this collision option to create a plane in front of the particles so that these particles interact with the plane and actually sort of disperse. So this is very useful when you think about a tap water falling on the ground. So this is very useful in doing that kind of simulations. So that's the beauty of it. You control the lights of those particles. You can control the rendering of those particles, the rendering mode of those particles, and many more, much more. So there is a lot of options for you to control how these particles behave, not only from the starting, but right to up to their end of life, how they change over time, and so on. So that's the beauty of using particle system, because it gives you a lot more control on what you're doing. In fact, another thing that you can do is you can add a material to this particle system also. So let's create a material just to show you that. I'm creating a material over here. Let's name the material as particle. And what I do is keep in mind over here, right now we are using a standard shader. But when I click on the downward facing arrow, there is a shader for the particles also. So right now there are two options, the standard surface and standard unit. I'm right now using the standard unit option. Again, this is just to demonstrate. You can do a lot more with this. Now I'll add this particle to this particle system. So this is very useful, especially when you're doing something like a fire. So instead of this particle, it could have been fire also. You could change how the fire is having, it's how the fire is interacting and all. So this is very useful when you're actually creating the fire type of representations also. So this is one of the most beautiful things about particle systems. Students are encouraged to have a look at what else you can do with the particle system, because its scope of work is very large and it actually adds a lot of value when you're doing the VR experiences. So do explore and do check it out, and make sure you make notes of what does what. So it will actually help you a lot in this. So with this, I'll end my lecture today. So just to summarize, we talked about particle systems today. This is one of the most used features when you are developing VR experiences, because it kind of gives an effect such as fire, water, kind of gives an effect such as fireworks also. So it's a very useful tool. So do explore all these options. Thank you very much.